I owned a quiet ranch far outside the city limits. The property had one long private driveway leading to the main road. That morning, I decided to close the gate while some work was being done inside. I never imagined my own gate would become an HOA emergency. I checked the lock twice and made sure the gate was secure. There was nothing unusual about blocking my own driveway. It was my land, my gate, and my decision. Then I heard a vehicle approaching from the road. Linda Whitmore pulled up in a white SUV and stopped directly outside my gate. She was the HOA president from a nearby community. I had never invited her onto my property, but she stepped out like she owned the place. Linda demanded that I open the driveway immediately. I told her the gate was on my private property and was staying closed. She insisted that the HOA needed access to the road. I reminded her that my ranch wasn't part of her neighborhood. Linda said she was giving me a final warning. I asked her what HOA rule gave her authority over my ranch. She couldn't produce one. Instead, she pulled out her phone and said she was calling the police. Linda told the dispatcher that someone was illegally blocking an important roadway. She made it sound like I was trespassing on someone else's property. I could hear her exaggerating the situation from across the gate. So I simply waited for the deputies to arrive. 2 sheriff vehicles finally came down the dirt road. Linda immediately walked toward them and began explaining her version of the story. She pointed at my gate as if it were evidence of a crime. The deputies then walked over to speak with me. The deputies asked me why I had blocked the driveway. I calmly explained that it was my private entrance and I had every right to close it. They asked for identification and information about the property. I gave them everything they requested. I handed the deputy my identification without hesitation. He looked at the card, then looked back at me. His expression suddenly became very different. Linda had no idea what was written on that identification. The deputy quietly asked me one question. "Chief?" I simply nodded. Linda's confident expression disappeared instantly. She had called 911 on the very person who commanded the department. The deputy looked at my identification twice before calling his partner over. They quietly compared the information and suddenly became very respectful. Linda stood there wondering why the conversation had changed. Then one deputy finally told her who I was. Ryan explained that I wasn't an ordinary ranch owner. I was the police chief responsible for their department. Linda stared at him as if she had completely misunderstood the situation. Then she looked back at me and realized what she had done. Linda immediately tried to explain that she had only called because she believed there was a problem. I told her that calling the police wasn't the issue. The problem was falsely claiming authority over private property. The deputies agreed that the property dispute needed to be handled properly. I showed the deputies the property documents and boundary records. The gate was clearly inside my ranch boundary. There was no emergency and no reason for anyone to force it open. The facts were becoming impossible to argue with. I handed them the official survey showing exactly where my property ended. The deputies reviewed the boundary and confirmed the gate was mine. Linda had no document showing that the HOA owned the driveway. Her entire complaint was based on an assumption. Linda insisted that the HOA had always considered the road part of the community. The deputy asked her to show him the legal documents proving that claim. She searched through her phone and folder, but couldn't produce them. For the first time, she realized her authority was only an assumption. The deputies told Linda that nobody would be entering the ranch without proper legal authority. They also explained that my gate could remain closed. Linda clearly wasn't happy with the answer, but this time, she had no badge or rule that could change it. Linda finally understood that the police weren't going to take her side automatically. They had investigated the situation and listened to both sides. More importantly, they now knew exactly who I was. Her attempt to use the police against me had completely failed. The deputies eventually returned to their vehicles. Before leaving, they confirmed that I was free to keep my driveway blocked. Linda had no choice but to return to her SUV. The ranch gate never moved. That evening, I locked the gate exactly as I had planned. Linda had called 911 because she thought she could control my property. Instead, she discovered that the man behind the gate was a police chief. And sometimes, the best way to win an argument is simply to know your rights.